About what?
About this presentation.
Ah, okay, good, good. Okay, we're live. My name is Jim Bray, and I am the chairman of the Environmental Commission in Lower Makefield Township. And we're officially going to open the meeting of August 8th, 2024. First item on the agenda is a review approval of July 11th, 2024 meeting minutes. Everybody has received a copy of that, and if you have any additional comments, let me know. It has been, reviewed by everybody. So if there's no comments or additions, what we'll do is I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as so written.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The meeting minutes are approved for July 11th, 2024. Now, for the second item on the agenda, we're actually quite fortunate today because Princeton Hydro, which is one of the foremost environmental engineering firms in the whole East Coast area, is going to make a presentation to us tonight on residential stormwater management structures. And this is a really, really important point, I think, anymore. People don't have to be reminded of the necessity of good stormwater management techniques. Unfortunately, that incident a year ago in Upper Makefield where 7 people drowned just gives even more credence to that, too. But one of the interesting things about the presentation tonight is that it doesn't look at the big picture, it looks at the small picture, which I think is incredibly important, because if each of us in our own homes can do a little, it adds up to a whole bunch. So with that, the presentation is going to begin with Jamie. I'm sorry, Jamie, I forgot your last name.
It's okay. It's Jamie Feinstein.
It's just, okay, Jamie is just Jamie, and Mark Gallagher is sitting at the desk, and Mark is an old friend of myself personally and the Environmental Council. So without further ado, we're going to start the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and thanks everyone for having us here tonight. I'm going to admit that we went a little bit rogue, and if you know anything about Mark, you can blame him. So we are going to talk a little bit about the big picture, but it's going to be an iterative conversation between how the small picture and the big picture, they're both there, they're together, they're separate, they're everything. So yeah, the focus for the beginning of the presentation is going to be sustainable landscape design initiatives for small projects. And we're essentially going to say that, I can't see my own notes, hold on. There we go. You're right, no, okay. We're going to talk about some best management practices for residential properties. We're also going to talk about our design and design build services, so we're going to toot our own horn just a little bit, so bear with us. And then we'd like to kind of reflect back at the act of the the intent of the 167 Act. Can we do better as citizens, as a township, as, people who-
Hi, I just want to interrupt. Can't hear you much.
Is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
So loud. And then we're going to talk about, in relation to that, some off-site considerations. What happens when we start looking at practices that can be mitigation kind of off-site? Seems like you've kind of already been going down that road in a multitude of ways already. Then we'll have a few minutes for questions. So looking at Articles 173 and 174, that's primarily what the small project stormwater management is. If you're disturbing more than 5,000 square feet of area with new impervious cover, there's a variety of options to manage those increases. So options within the table that are in the article include soil decompaction with meadows or lawn for less credit, rain gardens, bioinfiltration, vegetated filter strips, even tree planting. And they, I think it's very easy to follow, and you can see kind of like what you need to do. There's also gray infrastructure that's part of that ordinance, dry wells, infiltration trenches. But I think from our perspective and from my perspective as a landscape architect, thinking about the whole picture of our neighborhoods, of our watershed, you know, these practices, the gray infrastructure practices, they leave some things to be desired. I mean, they're quite simple. They'll do the job, but I think for the typical resident, and myself included here, is like, you don't see what's going on underneath the surface of the ground. And then when those fixes need to be made, it's not something you can usually necessarily do yourself. They require specialized maintenance and provide kind of limited habitat and environmental benefits that some of the greener approaches really maximize. So how does this affect you? I think we already know how this affects you, but, you know, for instance, I think this is a picture of Jeff Gall's rain garden on his property, which maybe you've all seen. You need to capture the 2 inches of rain that's going to fall on your new impervious surface. So if that's a new patio, 1,200 square feet, you have to deal with the water coming off of that. So that's 200 cubic feet of stormwater in this example, and that runoff does not have to be from that impervious surface itself, as long as it's the same total area that you're treating. So really what we want to focus on in these practices, and in any practice, is the right practice in the right place, making sure that we're choosing the best practice for the situation. So some of the green infrastructure approaches that could be the right practice for your backyard, your front yard, et cetera, are I will get to them actually, but just kind of in general, green infrastructure approaches have multiple benefits. They are increasing biodiversity and habitat value, which also supports the Ordinance 368 for the use of native plants, because I'm assuming, you know, you go through the trouble of building this thing, you're going to install native plants. Runoff and flood reduction, water quality improvements, increased resilience to flooding, aesthetic and neighborhood benefits. They're cost-effective measures, low input maintenance in general, and then kind of the longevity and adaptability are there, and that more is easily suited to property in various shapes and sizes. Whereas some of the gray infrastructure approaches, dry wells, infiltration, trenches, cisterns, you typically need a contractor and machinery to install it. You know, failure often requires a replacement or a major repair. Like I mentioned before, there's invisible issues, and really there's no habitat benefits to this. So, you know, we're not getting pollinators, we're not getting birds, we're not getting the aesthetic benefit of plants that are growing. The water quality improvements are limited, and in terms of landscape flexibility, you know, you're now going to have this piece of infrastructure on your property that you know, somewhat have to tiptoe around because you don't want to crush your pipe or your cistern. At least, you know, with green infrastructure, you can somewhat see it, and maintenance is, what I'll say, straightforward. You know, you can get in there, you can weed, you can shuffle out sediment if necessary.
Right.
So back to this right practice, right place idea for small practices. I mean, there's a lot of different green infrastructure practices, but you know, anything that's poorly sited or poorly constructed is going to fail. And so that's, you know, I think a little bit of where Princeton Hydro Services can be utilized for guiding people through what that actually means. And, you know, also wanting to put a practice in place to manage your water that suits the purpose. The picture kind of in the bottom middle is a reforestation planting. And so while you can get stormwater credit for planting trees, you're obviously not going to do a reforestation practice on your property, because that would not probably look like what you want it to look like. It's great in a forested context, but it's not going to work on our typically smaller lots here. So, you know, Chuck Norris can do a lot of things, but he can't fit a square peg in a round hole, and we shouldn't try either. Computer is stuck. Hold on. There we go. So as far as us and our individual lots, like what can we do on our properties? And I want to stress that, you know, even though these are listed as individual practices, stormwater management, rain gardens, tree planting, I mean, tree planting is probably not the best example of this, but a lot of these practices can be seamlessly integrated into your existing landscape character or your landscape aesthetic. Like this is the Delaware Raritan Basin Commission property, and it's, a lot of these features that you're seeing are in fact green infrastructure, but you don't necessarily know that because it doesn't have to look like this thing. So just running really quickly through sustainable landscape design. I won't go through this whole thing, but the idea is to mimic natural hydrological processes. And so this chart on the right is a hierarchy from the Philadelphia Water Department. And you can see even from their kind of rating system, the subsurface, the cistern kind of more structural things are not the highest on the list. All these subsurface detention with roof runoff, they're not the preferred thing because they don't have kind of the stacking and layering of benefits that the green infrastructure practices do. So on to the practices. We've broken this up, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one, but rain gardens is kind of like your first line of residential defense, I would say. They're easy to construct. They don't require a lot of media filters underneath. They're just kind of a depression in the landscape. Yes, you do have to do something to maintain them, but it's not the level of effort we're talking about for something more structural. Bioinfiltration, it's kind of the next level up from a rain garden where you actually have drainage media underneath. There could be under drainage in terms of piping. So it's a little bit of a more robust practice and has a higher level of effort to install. And might also be suitable for a larger property. Soil decompaction with meadow. Basically, anytime you can add pore space into the soil, that's going to increase opportunities for infiltration. And adding a meadow with deeply rooted grasses is going to be far superior to your typical grass lawn. It's going to keep those pore spaces open, allow water to infiltrate, and then also, benefits to pollinators and other animal habitat. Vegetated filter strips, it's a practice that I think people use at parking lots a lot when you have like a linear space. It's definitely along the same vein as a meadow of increasing that infiltration and just creating a buffer between either a porous, an impervious surface or a grass area. You can add a little bit of benefit in there. Tree planting, we went over this a little bit, but trees are great. They also filter water and evapotranspirate water, decrease runoff. They take time to establish, so you got to plan a little bit. And of course, there's space requirements. And then capture and reuse, it's a small thing that people can do when you have a limited amount of space. You can save on water for irrigation, and you can also have a little bit of fun with it and get creative in some of these rain barrel or kind of landscape features of disconnecting your roof runoff into your downspout. So those are kind of the residential style practices, and as you can see, all of those practices really are things that are going to impact the overall watershed as well. So I think this is a good time to switch to Mark and have him talk a little bit about what this means in the larger picture and how we can kind of think about these things a little bit differently, just in terms of space requirements and, if there's other options for practices, say we're restricted on space on our property, if a waiver gets given out, then there's no benefit, right? So what can we think of in that situation to continue, to pay it forward in terms of protecting our watershed?
So one of the first things that I always do looking at regulations is start with the intent. The intent of any regulation is what, if you understand it, your flexibility and the range of options you have typically lies within the intent. So this is really, Act 167 is about planning and management of stormwater in the various watersheds that are in Lower Makefield. So we tend to look at it typically more narrowly as a stormwater ordinance, and typically your township engineer is dictating whether it complies or it doesn't comply. Thank you. But there's so many things outside the range of engineered stormwater solutions, and Jamie spoke about some. So in this context, the township is looked at as the trustee for these watersheds. And, you know, again, the preservation of natural, economic, scenic, aesthetic, recreational, and historic values of those watersheds. What we typically look at are how we satisfy engineering goals. But when you think of the watersheds in this area, most of the watersheds have problems. Most of them are degraded. We don't have pristine streams at this point. So, you know, we have gray and green, not necessarily a perfect solution to fixing watershed problems, but because of the intent of Act 167, there are opportunities. And these opportunities require somewhat of a shift in our typical thinking. But, you know, I think the bottom line is pretty much anything's better than just acres and acres of lawn. So, one of the key issues with all developed landscapes is the increase in stormwater volume. And that is one of the key attributes that leads to the degradation of our streams. And for example, there's a stream in Jersey that we studied that 50% of the sediment load is due to in-stream erosion. And that in-stream erosion, the ultimate cause is increased volume of runoff to those streams. So a lot of the projects we focus on is how do we manage that volume? And that's pretty much what Jamie was talking about. So even if all our stormwater management was done perfectly and worked exactly as intended, we still have that increased volume to deal with. And what that tends to do is it impacts the functions of those streams. And one of the key factors, which we see frequently in New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, is because our streams are eroded, they're disconnected from their floodplains. So, and I'll show you some examples, but normally the floodplain is flooded between a 1 and 2 year storm event, smaller events. Once these streams start to erode, it could take a 5 to 10 year event for that water to actually get into the floodplain. So what happens is all that water goes downstream to the point that those people lowest in the watershed experience the most flooding. So we're talking about, and Jim, you had mentioned the tree bank ordinance. What I'm saying here is if there's properties that you can't fit an ideal stormwater solution in, maybe you should think about a similar path to the tree ordinance when they can't plant trees on the property. And that could go to things like stream restoration. And this is just a photograph from Maryland, where they're using stormwater fees to restore floodplains and restore streams and to reconnect those streams to floodplains. And riparian planting, and Stroud Water Resource Center had the unique opportunity to, because it's pretty much all the farms are owned by family members, they took a watershed and restored the riparian areas on almost the entire watershed and got to see what the improvements in water quality were. Just an example of like smaller solutions could be on lot, and there's a lot of little things we can do to help reduce that volume of water getting to a stream. And then larger solutions might be like how we can modify stormwater basins to make them function better, to retain more water or detain that water longer. And then there are solutions that may be with larger areas. Some of these treatments could be done in parks or at schools, areas or sites that have more area to work with to get a better impact to reduce that stormwater runoff. This is just some examples. This is a stream in Hunterdon County, not far. And what's interesting with this is classic, and I wouldn't say urban stream, but suburban stream, and mostly an agricultural watershed, but still impacted by too much stormwater volume. And this photo was taken year one. And these conifers in the back, by the time the project started, they were gone. That stream bank moved 28 feet. So all that soil is going into a bay or a river and creating problems. If it went to a lake, it could increase harmful algal blooms. So a lot of how we manage our watersheds impacts somebody downstream. And this is the final result, where this was looking at how do we elevate that stream so it can flood out of bank in those 1 to 2 year storms again. At the same project, it was how do we increase flood storage? So this project looked at elevating the stream bottom so it would flood more frequently, and at the same time lowering the floodplain. Now, these are more costly projects, but if the township had funds to even do matches, these are the kind of projects that could get funded by Pennsylvania DEP or DCNR. And this is a project, when we talk about developed landscapes, this is in Essex County, New Jersey, probably one of the more densely populated places in the country. It used to be a thread mill, and when they finished, they demolished all the buildings, filled in the floodplain. Oh. This is just removing that fill to reconnect that stream to the floodplain. And it was designed to be very much complex topography to hold that floodwater as long as possible. And that's what it looks like now. So urban industrial site to wetland. And I'm just showing this as there's a lot of possibilities. And I'm not saying these necessarily all fit into the town, but once you start to think about things, there's always a lot of options. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jamie and Mark. Maybe I'll start off with a question right away. I always promise people that when I get older, I was going to say, hey, 30 years ago this happened, but I'm going to say it anyway, okay? Because it's my experience living in this area for a long time that when you go back 20, 30, maybe 35 or 40 years, a 1-inch rain was an event. Now, it's not an event. It seems to happen all the time. So I'm assuming that when engineers like yourself and architects like Jamie talk about the 1 year flood and the 1 year storm, the 2 year storm, I guess the volume on those is different now than it was quite a few years ago?
I will answer that. And in New Jersey, it is. And even in Pennsylvania, they're changing the rainfall numbers. So historically, how we calculate those volumes with storm events was based on historic rainfall data, and every decade or so they'd update it. So right now the rainfall data that we typically use is 20 years old. So it's like a 20-year period 20 years ago. Well, like you said, a lot has changed in the past 20 years. So New Jersey, for example, is looking at predicted rainfall data based on models. So it is 1.3 times the typical numbers that we use to do our engineering calculations. And Pennsylvania is making similar adjustments.
All right, thank you. Do we have some more questions?
Yes. Going back to the small-scale projects that you spoke about, there's a soft cost and a hard cost to do that. And you mentioned that sometimes it's triggered by adding impervious surfaces. What kind of incentives are you aware of, or are there for a homeowner or a property owner that is not adding impervious surface but still wants to improve their current conditions? So there's not a mandate to do anything.
I don't know the answer to that in this community. I don't know, Mark, if you're aware of anything, but there's definitely other communities, and this will be other communities in Pennsylvania and across the country, and this will soon be happening in New Jersey as well, that stormwater utilities often have credit or incentive programs that will incentivize homeowners to do these practices to basically get a discounted fee on their utility or a credit for their utility payment. Princeton?
Not necessarily by individual lots, but there are, and it varies between state and region, but some states have like a green street program. And it could be just doing bump outs in residential streets where you could plant trees or do some kind of bioinfiltration. And it really can just be incorporated into developments that are existing that have a little bit wider streets. And Portland and Seattle did a lot of this when a lot of the whole concept of green infrastructure started, where it's just more typical development streets that they just modified a little bit, but added more green to it. That allowed for more trees to be planted and more vegetation. So there are opportunities, but for individual lots, not so much.
All right,
I think that-
do we have any other questions, maybe from the listening audience, Dave? Okay.
I just
Alan?
wanted to add to that last statement is that, yeah, we're talking about monetary incentives, but definitely, like, again, kind of like going back to that bigger picture, and that's the paradigm shift is, are the incentives going to become clear enough, to us in our climate change and climate adaptation and these storms, that the incentive is that, we'll see benefit by our properties being more resilient by adding these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of it. It's just, it's hard pill to swallow for a homeowner that
For sure.
has
Yeah,
to shell out the money.
definitely.
Yes, right now, we're in the process, the township is in the process of having their stormwater management ordinances looked at and possibly revised. A company called HRG is doing that work. And there's an appendix in our stormwater ordinances. It's called Small Project Stormwater Management Site Plan. And that's for residents that want to increase the amount of impervious surface on their property and need to control the volume. And it gives guidance. Right now, the structural BMPs are just infiltration trench, rain garden, and dry well. Now, is there any place we could get ideas for additional, more environmentally beneficial controls? I mean, rain garden's fine. Maybe we should expand that section. And you mentioned vegetative filter strips. Maybe add that to this guidance document. Is there any place because we can have input into this rewriting, because they're going to allow us to comment on the drafts.
Yeah, and I live in town.
Yeah.
And I don't have a huge yard. So if I was tasked with that, there's not necessarily a lot of space, and there's a rain garden, kind of the old school rain garden. It's just more of a landscape feature. And then now, my guess is your engineering department would probably really rather have a bioinfiltration basin, because that's very easy to calculate.
Yeah.
And so the things you mentioned are the more traditional
Yeah.
approaches. I love the idea of decompaction and meadow, but smaller lots, there's not a lot of room for them. I have a lot of trees in my yard. Don't have much more room to plant more trees. And I think a lot of my neighbors would fall into that same category. So it's not so much the flexibility or the options available, it's what they can fit on their lot. And that's kind of what Jamie was getting at, that the best option is finding the best place. And I do think this board could have the ability to say, I know you want to do this in your yard, but I'm not sure it's the best place. And that lends itself, almost like your tree ordinance, is there an option we could get, like a fund that the town could do something better at a different location?
Somewhere else.
Because I think you're right, those options aren't broad. And if I had a 5-acre property, yeah, I can do a lot more. But, being a 1/4-acre property, there's not a lot of flexibility.
All right, it would be nice if there was more than 3 structural BMPs available for.
And some of them are simple. And I think the simplest are probably the best, but they might not be able to satisfy those volumes that we're generating. I love the idea of planting more trees, but it's space limited, and then even if they're big trees, is it going to intercept as much rainfall as I'm generating with my impervious surface? And the answer is no. So I think some of the smaller lots are really the key. And Lower Makefield has a lot of development with smaller lots. Now, I can drive through some of the newer developments with
Big lots.
bigger lots, less sympathetic, because they have the ability to be more creative.
Yeah.
But some of them also have the nicest lawns in town.
After this lady, I have a question too.
Thank you. Do I need to state my name like the board, or can I just speak? I don't know what the rule is here.
Yeah.
Should I identify myself?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is April Bldg. I'm a resident of Lower Makefield Township. I'm here from the Mapleville neighborhood. We've flooded 3 times in the last 12 years. We've had 3 100-year storms, so many of the topics you all have covered tonight are very close to us. Our neighborhood our watershed should control it as I understand it. Our watershed itself would be fine. We gather the water from higher up. We sit the lowest possible point. I'm sure, as you mentioned, unfortunately, the events that happened last year in July, my neighbor and I, we were the yards that collapsed into the canal. So we're wondering, just as a whole, if there's something that the township might be able to help us with along the lines of these rain gardens, or ways that we as residents can help. We have a combination of the topography of our neighborhood, we have a combination of drainage, and we're working with the board on many other solutions that they're trying. But in our yards right now, we have so much damage from the flooding, and historically, even outside of our little U where we catch the water, one of our cross streets, they have legacy swales that have been put in, but people built over them, so they get tons and tons of pooling on a regular day. People who have honestly given up on using the bottom of half of their home because they have so much water in their backyards. They're looking into pumps, and it's expensive. We're an older neighborhood. These are homes that were built in the 60s. We have older residents who have been there for generations, and they're seeing this happen with no recourse. And so much of it is cost prohibitive because we've suffered so much damage financially from the flooding. So my question is, in addition to sharing this presentation, are there other resources potentially that we could partner with the EAC or get better ideas on how we can do this? Because we want a better environment. I want a place that he's safe. I want things that are going to contribute to the larger ecosystem and giving back. And yes, French drains are great, but they are expensive, and but they're not also going to solve everything for everyone, because we have so many unique problems because of the way our land is. So that is only my question. What can we do as residents? How can we work together on potentially some ideas on, because not every yard is the same problem, but we're all the majority of our neighborhood is suffering in similar ways. Thank you. And I do thank you all for organizing this. We do appreciate this information.
Yeah, I will make one comment that, as Alan stated earlier, the township is in the process right now of completely modifying our stormwater management ordinance. And I think special attention is going to be placed on properties like your own. And the EAC is going to, consider that a primary problem to talk about with the township when we actually do modify this ordinance. And I don't know the timing on it. Do you know the timing on this, Alan?
I thought they were supposed to come out with a draft this fall.
Okay.
So it should be fairly soon. Yeah, somehow the upstream flow has to be reduced.
Yes.
And that's what we have to look at upstream.
Absolutely, and there's been
Yeah.
plenty of work done with the land studies team that's come out, and they've assessed, and they're continually assessing. So we understand that there's work being done to eventually protect our neighborhood and stop the water from coming, because we can manage our own water. It's the other people's that we can't. So we know that that's happening, but that's, next spring, next summer, and honestly, this time of year, hurricane seasons is rough for us. So anything that can empower us to feel as though we're part of the solution is what we're hoping to gain from this. Because we know there's certain things we can do, and it looks very easy, but I don't know which plants to buy. And I don't know if just because water pool's there, if that's the right place for me to put a rain garden. And that's where we could absolutely, and we know you all have a lot to do and the whole township to worry about, but if there's any way we could partner with you, we'd deeply appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for
And
bringing
again,
this to our attention.
Yes. And again, thank you all for doing this. We do appreciate it so much. Thank you.
And Fran and Mark, I want to thank you very much for the presentation. It was first rate. Yes, I'm sorry, Dominique, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one idle question. What about stores, car parks? Are there anything, for the moment, they seem to be all impervious and in the water, especially for the moment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, the car parks of stores, are there any special regulations for the stores to improve the surface of the car parks or do any drainage or anything like that?
Oh, from like large parking areas?
Yes, yes.
It's interesting, when I was a younger consultant many years ago, there was a lot of work being done by this group called the Washington Council of Government, and they did some early stormwater studies. And I still remember very clearly one of the keys to the studies is they called all that excess parking car habitat, and that it was based on Christmas. So all these shopping centers, how many times have you ever seen them filled? So a lot of that is really worth reconsidering, because there tend to be just large areas of stormwater generating surface. And some of those less used part of the parking, they probably could be converted to pervious pavement. And we're at a day where, especially with climate change and increased rain, and it costs more, developers would hate it, but probably should think of parking decks where it's more vertical. And just so you know, and we didn't get much rain, we got like 2 inches, but Pennington got 7.5. So what we're seeing lately, it's not just this rainfall that's pretty evenly distributed. We get these cells that are crazy, and people couldn't get home. All the roads were flooded in Pennington last night, or 2 nights ago. So we're in a period that with climate change, we should be rethinking not just how we manage stormwater, but how it's generated. Where's it coming from? And that's the one thing that people are very resistant. But you're right, those parking lots, they're a waste of space in many places.
Yeah, the EAC comments on the Wegmans development, we really try to get them to reduce their number of parking spots. It's like 1,000 in that whole area, and they wouldn't budge. They made a few pervious, but, kept the number.
And it's traditional approach, it's traditional how you calculate parking, and so much of it is based on Christmas. And maybe it'll get better since everyone's buying from Amazon. That might be a key to our stormwater management. But a lot of it, and we mentioned, these are paradigm shifts. To really do something positive, we need to get away from our standard approach to not just development, but how we manage our resources and how we manage stormwater, and really just take a few steps back and rethink a lot of just how we have traditionally done things.
All right, thank you, Mark. And again, thank you for the presentation. It was excellent, and hope to see you again soon. We have to move now because we only have about 10 minutes left, and we've got quite a few things to go through.
Jamie, could we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? That might be handy to making comments on our stormwater changes. So, yeah, I don't know if you have somebody's email, any of our emails to send it. You have mine? Okay.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you again. All right, the next item on the agenda is the 2024 Long-Range Master Tree Plan. And Ellen and I were at the BOS meeting last night, and it was a very, very positive, meeting for the tree plan. They approved it in its entirety, and they also, in addition, approved a fall planting at the golf course and Makefield. So there's going to be roughly 89 trees planted at the golf course and about 20 in Makefield, and that'll take place this fall.
Yeah. There is a lot of money in the tree bank, $344,000, which, as I said.
And we made sure years ago it can only be used for trees.
Yeah, and we might have to modify that to allow shrubs. 'cause
Well, we're
those are
gonna,
in
yeah, we're
plan.
gonna talk about that. They talked also about the shrubs we planted that technically doesn't go along with the exact wording in the ordinance, but we're gonna take a look at that as well. The ordinance says simply trees.
It must be used for planting trees, because we were warned if we didn't say that, it might get shuffled off on other
Right.
things. This was 10 years ago.
So I'm not sure, we're gonna have a discussion on that too. I have a couple of thoughts, one of them being that possibly we can plant shrubs from another pocketbook, because shrubs are not expensive. It costs us roughly $400 for a tree, but basically you can buy a shrub for about $20 to $40, a decent-sized shrub, and they lend themselves to community involvement too, to planting. So this is something we're going to look at.
And the trees are native trees, aren't they? Or-
Yes, they must be. There must be shrubs, perennials, anything that we plant in Lower Makefield. All right, the next thing is recycling. The new date is October 26, 24. And it's going to be pill bottles, styrofoam. We're going to actually prepare an article for the Bucks County Herald. Any questions on that? The new date is October 26th.
We already have the flyer, so we are ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll probably put one here, maybe tomorrow, I'll come by and.
Yeah, Alan does a nice job
Yeah.
on these flyers.
But
as
I'll
you can
probably
see.
wait till September to put them out everywhere else, 'cause it's still early.
All right, the next item is Birdtown. And Jeanne, are you with us?
You still awake, Jeanne?
Well, anyway, what Jeanne has prepared for
She flew
Birdtown
away.
is a lecture. I don't know, maybe she went to sleep in Vermont. I don't
Yeah.
know. But anyway,
She flew
It's a
away.
flew away. Anyway, a lecture on hummingbirds will be held at the LMT Community Center from 10 to 12 p.m. on September 28th, 2024. And we're really looking forward to that. A good friend of Jeanne and Jeanne, I forget Jeanne's last name, from Newtown, Birdtown, are in the midst of preparing this PowerPoint, and Jean's seen some of the initial slides and said it's really first rate.
I won't be here.
Well, we'll send you,
Okay.
you can, yeah, you can call in, Dominique, and we'll take care of you.
I'll be on mine.
The proposed single-use plastics ban, I talked to John Lewis about that, and he wants to put that on hold till the fall because of primarily the stormwater management ordinance And I've been trying to get in touch with Supervisor Bldg, and I will continue to, try and get in touch with Supervisor Bldg to talk to her about the single-use plastics ban.
Thank you.
Next item is an update on the land use plans. Alan, you want to fill us in?
Yes, drafted some comments on the revision to the Wright Farm subdivision. That's 47 homes on the 50 acres. And we need to vote to approve it, and then I'll send it in tomorrow to Jim Majewski. The comments are similar to the previous ones. They never responded to our previous comments, which I'm going to make a note of and mention to Jim Majewski, because they should really be responding. There were some problems with their designated open space, the dimensions, the lack of a buffer, and just the whole layout of it. And they need street trees, more street trees than they've said, or put in the landscape plan. And a number of other things, the traffic thing, of course, that nobody cares about with me, but
I read that.
they really underestimate the amount of traffic going through the Yardley, Newtown, Stony Hill intersection, that three-way intersection that's always a mess. So they should get the numbers right, so we have an accurate picture of what's going to be going on in the future. So I move we approve my comment letter, our comment letter on Wright Farm.
Yes, I will second that.
All
All in favor?
Yes.
right.
Okay.
So
Yeah, one other comment, though. Alan, you always do a really good job on this. In addressing these reviews, it's a tedious process and it's time-consuming, and we always appreciate the work you do on these.
You learn a lot when you look at this stuff. Yeah, the big problem with this is access. They still have that right-in, right-out access on Yardley, Newtown Road, and that's going to be a mess.
All right, EAC lectures and event series. Because of popular demand, a second falconry exhibition has been scheduled for 10/5/24 at the Memorial Park venue. The first event really exceeded our expectations. We had over 110 people there, and people were actually calling up Super Manager Kratzer saying, are they intending to hold another event like this because we couldn't attend for one reason or another. So there was a really, really great positive responses from that event. So we decided again to hold a second one in the same location. We're going to have to be a little mindful of traffic flow this time because, quite frankly, in the first one, we didn't envision that many people coming. So that's something we're going to have to take a look at. The next item is the model energy ordinance, and this is something that we have to respond to the Planning Commission. So what I would like is comments from everybody no later than this coming Monday, which is what, 5th? No, today is the what? The 8th, 9, 10, 11, the 12th. And just send them to me, and then I'll just compile them, and I'll send them off to the Planning Commission.
Kevin, I have a question. You made the comment, what the model ordinance is saying that there should be no small-scale wind turbines on buildings?
On occupied buildings.
It's saying, we don't want that, right? I mean, that's,
Yeah, we don't want that.
yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a couple of things I didn't like.
Right, not the big ones, big turbines, giant ones,
Right.
but these are small scale and they're not visually bad looking. I mean,
Right.
they're, okay, well, that's.
Yeah, actually, some of them, I've seen photos of them, and they're almost like an aesthetic revolving device that
Right,
they have on top of lampposts, and they're actually very attractive to look at as they revolve. And, that's what I call the silver BB approach, not the silver bullet approach. And I think the silver BB approach, to me, is always one of the best ways to go. You have to solve these issues with not one big item, with a whole bunch of small infrastructures. So Okay, so anyway, make sure that I have all those comments by Monday. If for some reason that you find that date a little tight, just let me know.
Okay.
Next thing, open space recommendations and ballot referendum. Another positive thing, this was passed by the Board of Supervisors at the 7/17/24 meeting. And what it is, it's a $15 million bond referendum that's going to go on the November ballot. I don't know the exact date of the ballot. Anyway, early November.
November 5th.
November 5th. So that was another, we're on a good roll right now. That was another really positive thing that just happened recently. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that.
We should probably publicize this, at least a fact sheet, something to tell about it, so people get the word out that it's going to be on the ballot. Seems like something, I started to write up just a flyer that talks about it, but I guess we can't spend money, our budget, on, I mean, I'm thinking out of the box here, but lawn signs, getting about 30 lawn signs and spreading them around the township.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think we ought to talk to Dave Kratzer
Yeah,
about, but I think our budget would, allow something positive like that.
But yeah, it would be voting yes on this open space referendum.
Well,
I wonder
yeah, that
if
might
some
be,
of the
yeah.
supervisors might get irate. But
Yeah, if it's pro, yes, I just thought maybe you were just going to say, make sure you vote on, we could do something like that.
Yeah.
You know.
But, the fact sheet, I could say the benefits of open space and mention, the only disadvantage would be the payment, the $81 a year. And we could just put that on there, and that would be the pluses and minuses, and people can decide.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay, right.
How much is the leaf assessment these days? It's around $81.
Yeah, you mean the leaf pickup?
Yeah.
I think it's around $80, but to be honest with you, I have my tax bill there
Yeah,
that's
can you
due.
look it up?
Yeah, I'm
Because
going to take a look at that.
That's a good comparison for people to make. You're paying this much to pick up your leaves, and you can pay this much and get a couple hundred acres of open space. Yeah.
Didn't realize there was a leaf assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, next item is Tree City USA, and the EAC reviewed several municipal tree projects a while ago, and we decided that the best way to go was Tree City USA. It's really tied into the Arbor Day Foundation, and this item is already placed on the agenda, the BOS agenda for August 21st. I already have a PowerPoint presentation prepared, for that. And I don't want to take full credit. I basically used a lot of the information given out by Tree City USA, and I modified it slightly. The idea is I don't want to put anybody to sleep, so it's going to be a relatively short presentation. And hopefully, the board will be very receptive. There's really no downside, to this project when you really think about it. Any comments? Okay. Next item is, we already talked about the model energy ordinance. Yeah, we already talked about that. The open space we talked about, the heritage tree investigation. We have a woman who talked about a monumental hackberry tree on her property that we're still taking a look at. The problem is the gentleman who heads up the Pennsylvania Big Trees, we found out it's a voluntary position, and he just had a new addition to the family, and his time is pretty limited. But we're going to be probably having him out here in the fall, and when he's out here, we want him to take a look at 2 or 3 other trees that we think are candidates for the big trees list. Newsletters. Paul's not here right now, but
Has he sent a letter out since our last meeting?
I'm not sure.
I thought I saw something.
No.
Oh, Jeanne, you're on with us again.
I've been on.
Oh, okay, well,
Yes.
well, we asked for your input on Birdtown, and there was no response. So anyway, yeah,
But yeah.
anyway, did you say that, yes, we did have a newsletter recently?
No, we have not.
There was a test
Yeah, I got that one, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
But that wasn't the real one, so what's gonna be in the newsletter? The falconry event,
The falconry event, I think the
October 26th recycling.
right, and the Hummingbird lecture.
Okay, so yeah,
And,
those things. Paul, if you're out there.
Yeah, I don't know if Paul's listening or not, but we'll make sure that he's informed about those
'Cause,
items.
yeah, in the next few weeks, it might be a good idea, send it out.
All right,
I might see him Saturday, so.
okay. All right, the next item are odds and ends. Anybody want to talk about anything that's not on the agenda?
Oh, yeah, how about is anybody interested in going to the EAC event that's, I don't know, many,
You're talking about that regional event.
yeah, the regional thing. I mean, it seems like we should have somebody there.
All right, I think we sent that out to all the members, though, and asked them if they had any inclination to going to that, but maybe do you have a copy of that somewhere, Jeanne?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe we'll send it out to the members again and see if there's any interest.
When is it?
Yeah, and also,
No, when is it?
also, sorry, Alan, the other thing is that Harvest Day, we could have the EAC at a table, or if nobody is interested in joining me at the table, I will do Birdtown, do a Birdtown table. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in that, I'm not sure we're going to get a positive response from the EAC, but we'll send out, a note to everybody and, ask them if they're interested in that. I think you were going to check that out and find out, if there's any fees involved and that sort of thing.
Maybe we could share a
Right,
table with
right.
Yardley EAC.
Yeah, Jeanne, Kevin just made had a good idea. Maybe we can share that with the Yardley EAC. And you've been in touch with Patty Kleiner, who is not only a naturalist at Bowman's, but she's also a member of the Yardley EAC. So perhaps you would want to get in touch with her and for some kind of collaboration. And
Yeah, that would make sense, except they are not, I don't think they are just starting, I think, to revitalize their EAC. I don't know that maybe, Kevin, do you know if their EAC is actually up and running yet?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know, I saw a Facebook posting, they have like 5 or 6 people that are starting up. So, I mean, it is starting, whether they'll be organized enough to have a table is the next question, but yeah.
Yeah, and you really don't need a super organization to have a table, just a couple of people there with maybe some environmental literature and just getting the word around that you're up and running again. But why don't you talk to Patty, Jeanne, and see what she thinks?
Yeah, I will do that.
Having something about plastics too, maybe? Or is it too early?
Sure. I mean, at an EAC, we can certainly put out any literature that we think is,
Yeah.
pertinent. And single-use plastics, this is something on our list that eventually we want to get done here.
And I'll put together the flyer on the ballot referendum for the open space. And have
Right.
that too.
Yeah, so thinking about it, that might have merit because, there's a lot of things that, we could discuss with people who stop by and a lot of good literature we could put on the
Yeah,
table.
we have quite a lot going on, so, makes sense.
Okay, all right. I think that's about it. Open discussion. I guess we've just kind of had our open discussion. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring forth before we end the meeting?
No, we've covered a lot tonight.
Yeah, I think so, we have too. What about you, Dominique and Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I will officially close.
I just want to say something to Kevin. Kevin, your cute little daughter, she would love the Hummingbird workshop. There are going to be a whole lot of pictures of hummingbirds and the young woman who's doing the workshop. She has pictures of herself feeding. Feeding the hummingbirds. So I think you ought to bring it.
she enjoyed the butterfly one. So yeah, I'll make sure we attend.
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right, I think that's it for tonight then. The meeting is officially closed.